Why did you come here?
because she needed hope.
The chandelier above the dining room of the Gilded Oak, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, cast a warm golden glow over the linen-covered tables. Richard Caldwell, a real estate tycoon whose name was etched into half the city's skyline, sat with a glass of bourbon in hand, his tailored suit crisp against the leather chair. Across from him, his daughter, Emily, sat quietly in her wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the untouched plate of roasted duck before her. The hum of elite conversation filled the air, senators, CEOs, and old money families murmuring over their $200 entrees. It was Emily's 14th birthday, but the occasion felt more like a business deal than a celebration. Richard was mid-sentence, discussing a new waterfront development with a client, when a small figure appeared at his side. A girl, no older than 10, stood barefoot in a faded green dress, her braids loose and slightly frayed. Her dark eyes locked onto Richard's with unnerving calm. "Feed me," she said, her voice soft but steady, "and I'll heal your daughter." The room seemed to freeze. Richard's fork stopped halfway to his mouth, a piece of filet mignon dangling. "What did you just say?" he growled, his voice low, dangerous. "Feed me," she repeated, "and I'll heal your daughter." Richard's face flushed crimson. He slammed his fork down, the clatter echoing off the marble floors. "Get away from her," he roared, standing so fast his chair scraped harshly against the floor. His hand shot out, shoving the girl's shoulder. She stumbled backward, catching herself on the edge of the table. Her small fingers clutched the tablecloth, but it slipped, pulling an avalanche of plates, glasses, and silverware to the ground. Crystal shattered, wine spilled, and Emily's birthday cake, a $500 creation of chocolate and gold leaf, smashed into the chaos. The girl, Lila, landed on her hands and knees, her dress now stained with sauce and wine, bits of mashed potato clinging to her hem. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Richard's client, a silver-haired banker, stared in shock. The manager, a wiry man in a black suit, rushed over, wringing his hands. "Sir, is everything all right? What happened?" "She happened." Richard jabbed a finger at Lila. "How did this street kid get in here? I want her out now." But before the manager could act, a faint voice cut through the tension. "Dad, stop." Emily's words were barely audible, her eyes wide with something Richard hadn't seen in years. Emotion. "Don't yell at her. She didn't mean it. She was trying to help." Richard turned, stunned. "She trespassed. She humiliated us. She touched my arm." Emily interrupted, her voice trembling. "And I felt something. Just for a second. Please, let her stay." The room went silent. Emily hadn't spoken with such conviction since the accident 4 years ago that left her paralyzed. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes darting between his daughter and the girl on the floor. Lila, still kneeling amid the wreckage, wiped wine from her cheek with the back of her hand. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked at Emily with a quiet strength that made Richard's skin prickle. 5 minutes, he muttered, sitting back down. "That's it." The manager signaled a waiter to bring a clean chair and a simple plate of chicken and cornbread for Lila. She sat across from Emily, her movements deliberate, almost regal despite her stained clothes. She tore off a piece of bread, chewed slowly, and said, "May I hold your hand again?" Emily extended her hand without hesitation. Lila's small fingers closed over hers. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Emily's eyes widened. "It's warm," she whispered. "My legs, I feel something." Richard leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Stop it. This is nonsense." "It's not," Emily said, her voice firmer now. "I swear, Dad." Lila let go and leaned back. "That's all for today," she said. "Healing isn't just physical. It takes time." Richard stood, furious. "You think you can waltz in here, touch my daughter, and play miracle worker? You're a con artist. What do you want, money? Fame?" Lila met his gaze, unflinching. "I wanted food. And a chance to help." She turned to Emily, her voice softening. "You're the first person who didn't look away." Emily's eyes glistened. Richard felt the room shift, the weight of every stare, waiters, guests, even the security cameras in the corners. He pointed at Lila. "Get her out," he told the manager, his voice like a whip. But Emily's plea stopped him cold. Dad, please. Let her be my friend. That night, in the back of his chauffeured Bentley, Richard stared out at Chicago's glittering skyline. Emily sat beside him, her fingers twitching slightly, her eyes fixed on her lap. She did something to you, didn't she? Richard said, his voice tight. I don't know, Emily admitted. But I felt it. It wasn't a trick. She's a fraud, Richard snapped. Probably rubbed some chemical on your skin to fake a sensation. I'll have the restaurant's footage pulled. We'll find out who let her in. Dad, Emily said, her voice sharp. She didn't ask for anything. You humiliated her in front of everyone, and she still looked at me like I mattered. Richard had no answer. Back at their Lakeshore Drive penthouse, he poured himself a whiskey and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawling below like a chessboard he'd mastered. But tonight, something felt off. Emily wheeled herself to the living room and pulled up the restaurant's security footage on her tablet. The silent video showed Lila appearing beside their table, Richard's outburst, the crash of dishes, and Lila standing tall despite it all. Emily paused the footage on Lila's face, calm, resolute, and somehow older than her years. You didn't see her, Emily said quietly. Not really. You saw her clothes and assumed the rest. Richard downed his drink. I saw a manipulator. Then you weren't looking, Emily said, wheeling away to her room. The next morning, Richard summoned the entire staff of the Gilded Oak to a private meeting. Waiters, chefs, even the valets stood in a tense line. Who let her in? He demanded, pacing. She's not on the guest list. She's not on the cameras. Someone helped her. No one spoke. A dishwasher finally said, Sir, she just appeared. I was clearing plates, looked up, and she was there. You expect me to believe a kid materialized in a five-star restaurant? Richard snapped. By evening, he'd reviewed every frame of footage. Lila was nowhere on the entry cameras. She simply existed at his table. He hired 3 private investigators, offering $20,000 for any lead on her identity. Days passed with no thing, no name, no school, no record. Meanwhile, Emily grew stronger. Her physical therapist reported muscle activity in her legs, impossible after 4 years of paralysis. It's not a mistake, the therapist insisted. Something's happening. Richard couldn't sleep. Lila's words haunted him. Feed me, and I'll heal your daughter. At 3 a.m., he found a folded napkin by his piano, a note inside in delicate handwriting. Healing starts in the heart. Feed what you've ignored. Trust what you've doubted. Find me. No signature. He stared at it, his hands shaking. He returned to a small diner in Bronzeville, a place he'd passed a week ago where something had felt alive. The owner, Clara Jones, wiped down the counter, her eyes narrowing as he entered. You again, she said. I need to see her, Richard said, holding up the napkin. Clara studied him. She's not here now. She comes and goes. Helps with dishes sometimes. Never stays long. Will she come back? Richard asked. If she does, listen this time, Clara said. Richard sat by the window, coffee untouched, and waited. Hours passed. Then, the bell above the door jingled, and Lila walked in, wearing a clean but worn gray dress. She saw him and didn't flinch. You waited, she said. I did, Richard replied. Were you in my home? I was where I needed to be, Lila said, sitting across from him. You're starving, Mr. Caldwell. Not for food. For meaning. Richard blinked. You don't know me. I know you built this city but can't look your daughter in the eye, Lila said. You silence others to protect yourself. You have everything, but nothing that matters. He looked away, her words cutting deeper than he expected. Emily's feeling her legs, he admitted. Did you do that? I reminded her body what it forgot, Lila said. She pulled out a folded paper and slid it across the table. These are people you've hurt. Not for revenge. For healing. Richard opened it. 5 names. He knew them all. Ellen Harper, a teacher he'd fired, Thomas Reed, a farmer whose land he'd taken, Laura Bennett, a journalist he'd blacklisted. I can't undo the past, he said. But you can face it, Lila replied, standing. Will I see you again? You'll feel me when you need to, she said, and left. Richard started with Ellen Harper. Her modest home in Evanston smelled of lavender and old books. She answered the door, her eyes wary. Mr. Caldwell, she said coolly. What do you want? I was wrong, he said. Firing you for speaking out about my school funding cuts was wrong. I want to make it right. Ellen studied him. Come inside, she said finally. Over coffee, he apologized, offering to fund a new community education program. She didn't forgive him, but she listened. Next was Thomas Reed, whose farm in Wisconsin had been seized for a mall project. Standing on his porch, Richard said, I took your land. I laughed at your loss. I'm sorry. Thomas invited him in, and they talked for hours. Richard promised to turn the mall into a community park. Thomas nodded. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Laura Bennett was harder. In her small apartment in Hyde Park, she faced him with fire in her eyes. You ruined my career, she said. You buried my stories about your deals. Richard handed her a folder. Your articles, with my legal team's confirmation of their truth. And a letter to your editor for your reinstatement. Laura took it, her hands shaking. Why now, she asked. A little girl told me healing starts in the heart, he said. Laura softened. I saw her, in a library, eating an apple. She told me, keep writing. He's almost ready. She meant you. Weeks later, Richard found himself at a shelter in Englewood, led there by a pastor named James Carter. Lila came to us 2 years ago, Carter said. No parents, no records. She helps everyone, cooks, reads to kids, comforts the broken. She's different. Is she in danger? Richard asked. She's looking for someone, Carter said. A man who hurt her mother. She left this. He handed Richard a small journal. Inside, Lila had written, If kindness is weakness, I'll be the weakest. Mr. Caldwell doesn't see yet, but he will. Carter pointed him to Mrs. Alma Tate, a retired nurse in Bronzeville who knew Lila's mother, Grace. In Alma's cramped apartment, Richard learned the truth. Grace had been a cleaner at a chemical plant owned by Vincent Morrow, Richard's old rival. She'd died of exposure to toxic waste, leaving Lila alone at 5. Grace kept notes, Alma said, handing him a folder of drawings and scribbled warnings about Morrow's illegal dumping. Richard's heart sank. She's chasing him, he said. She's chasing justice, Alma corrected. In the shadow of an abandoned factory near the Chicago River, Richard and Pastor Carter found Lila, her clothes torn, clutching her mother's journal. He saw me, she whispered. Vincent Morrow. At the docks. We're doing this together, Richard said. No more running. They uncovered files and the factory proof of Morrow's toxic dumping, linked to Grace's death. With Pastor Carter's help, they leaked the documents to watchdog sites. Hashtags like Justice for Grace trended overnight. News anchors reported, Whistleblower exposes chemical cover-up. Lila's face, holding her mother's journal outside a courthouse, became a symbol. Morrow fought back. Federal agents questioned Richard about Lila's identity. Get a warrant, he told them, shielding her. Later, a threatening call warned, walk away, or she won't see 13. Richard didn't flinch. He moved Lila to a safe hotel, hired security, and prepared for war. At a press conference in a Southside community center, Lila spoke. My mother, Grace, was a cleaner. She saw kids get sick from chemicals and tried to stop it. They silenced her, but I won't let her be forgotten. The crowd roared. A nurse approached afterward, tears in her eyes. Grace gave me extra gloves when I was scared in the ER. She called me her little fighter. That night, Richard and Lila stood on his penthouse balcony. You scared? He asked. Yes, she admitted. But I'm more tired of silence. In Washington, Lila testified before a federal committee. My mother saw kids treated like numbers, she said, holding up Grace's journal. She wrote the truth. You can't erase that. The gallery erupted in applause, families holding photos of lost loved ones. Back in Chicago, the fallout was swift. Morrow's company collapsed under lawsuits. A health center named for Grace opened in Englewood. Richard funded it with $25 million, standing beside Lila at the ribbon cutting. I was a man who broke things, he told the crowd. Lila showed me how to build. Lila, now 12, spoke last. I asked for bread once. Now I offer a table. No one heals alone. The crowd cheered, their faces lit by hope. Years later, Lila co-chaired a national advocacy group. Richard, no longer just a tycoon, mentored her, his heart lighter. Grace's mural watched over Englewood, her smile eternal. Lila kept her mother's journal close, its pages worn but alive. She'd turned pain into purpose, proving that even the smallest voice could shake the world.